Like Bob said, I'm with Planning Solutions Group. We're an independent financial planning firm. We help individuals plan for retirement, help them feel organized, and help them feel confident about their future lives. So what I really wanted to do today is just kind of go into investing, financial planning. It's a very high-level discussion. Like Bob said, I don't like just standing up here. If you have questions, feel free to interrupt me. At the same time, we do want to get you out here at a reasonable time. Thanks for coming. Pretty good crowd. I'm surprised you want to be here at 5 o'clock on a weekday to talk about finances. It's not the most exciting of topics, but I'll try to make it a little more interesting. So with that, let's get started. We're going to cover a couple topics today. Financial planning, what is it? We'll dive deep in what are the rules of qualified plans. We're going to start very basic, high level. What are some different types of investments that you may see out there? Talk about retirement planning, which, looking at the group, may affect most of you in here at some point soon. And then what to consider when investing your money. There's a lot of noise out there. I know if you turn on the radio on the weekends, you have someone pitching something to you. You may talk to your friends and your family and your coworkers, and they're pitching something else. My job is to give you the pros and cons to some different types of investments and help you make the decision that fits in your individual situation. So let's go to the next slide. We'll talk about some of the types of investments. And the first thing, on the weekends you hear a lot about annuities. This is the most probably controversial type of investment out there. I'm definitely not pro or. Most of us don't have pensions available to us, so an annuity is kind of a form of a private pension. There's a lot of different types of annuities. There's the immediate annuity, which gives you income now. So if you're 65, you need income because you're retiring. An immediate annuity could be a good fit. There's fixed annuities that just give you a fixed amount of interest every single year. It could be 2% or 3%. You're not going to get too much in today's environment. There's indexed annuities, which get extremely complex, and variable annuities, which are also complex. These allow you to invest in the stock market, yet have some level of guarantees tied to them as well. Annuities have riders, or these are kind of additional bells and whistles and other features that add on to the annuities. And you pay an additional cost and you get some sort of benefit out of it. So I'm going to talk on the next couple slides some of the pros and cons to those to be aware of. And then finally, taxation on annuities is different than some of your more traditional investments. If you're using non-401k or IRA money, just let's say you have some money sitting in the bank and you put it in an annuity, you don't pay any taxes on the growth in that account until you pull money out. So if we go to the next slide, what are the benefits of annuities? I have an annuity. I know a lot of clients do, but they're not a fit for everybody. My dad worked for the federal government his entire career. He has a pension. He doesn't need an annuity. So if someone tried to sell it to him, I'd say they're after the commission and not doing what's in your best interest. But what are the benefits of annuities? One, we talked about taxes. If you're in a higher tax bracket and you have some money to invest, tax deferral is a benefit. For most people, that's not why they invest in annuities. The second reason, and I think the most common reason for annuities, is you get a guarantee from the insurance company for a certain amount of income in retirement or a certain death benefit that will be paid out to your spouse or to your children when you pass away. Annuities are like a private pension. I mentioned that before. For those of us, and most of us, that aren't expecting a pension when we retire, this is a way to get some level of guaranteed income coming in the door. And this could be something just to cover the mortgage payment or cover your basic expenses in retirement. And then you have money outside of it that's for your discretionary spending. Longevity insurance, that if you expect to live a long time, the annuity company is on the hook for paying you that income stream for the rest of your life. So your value might go to zero, but the insurance company is going to pay you income as long as you're living. And then finally, peace of mind. I think there is There's cost to annuities, but to some extent, they do give you that comfort that regardless of what the stock market's doing, regardless of what Trump and North Korea are fighting about, your annuity is going to pay you that income stream, and there's a big benefit to that. I want you to really think about the downsides to annuities. There's a lot of people out there who call themselves financial advisors, financial planners, but really all they do is sell annuities. They have high commissions with them, so you have to really question why is the advisor recommending it? Is it in your best interest? And so the downsides are they do have higher fees. Well, the higher fees, to some extent, make sense because they're guaranteeing you things other investments won't give you. They might guarantee you income for the rest of your life. They might guarantee you a certain amount of money to your wife or to your children when you pass away. That's worth paying those extra fees for. Surrender penalties. A lot of people don't realize that when you buy an annuity, you're tying your money up for a certain period of time. That could be 7 years, it could be 10 years. I've seen annuities that tie your money up for 15 years, so you can't touch it. It's important to be aware of it, and that's one reason you should never put all of your money, I don't want to say never, but almost all the time, don't put all your money into an annuity because you're locking it up. Limited investment options. The insurance company will give you a choice of how to invest in the annuity, and then when you pull money out of it, it's not taxed at capital gains rates that a regular investment would be taxed at. It's taxed at your ordinary income rate. So if you're still working and you're taking money out, you could be in a very high tax bracket. Mutual funds. This is probably the most common investment vehicle out there. If you look at your 401k statements, you're investing in mutual funds. A mutual fund is, just think of it as a basket of stocks or bonds. It's managed by a professional who's going to pick those stocks within the fund or pick the different bonds within the fund. The benefit to it is that you're diversified. You're not investing in one company. I mean, I'm sure some people in here remember Enron. People who worked for Enron had a lot of their money in Enron stock. They thought nothing would ever go wrong with the company. But when the company went bankrupt, they lost their life savings. In a mutual fund, that fund could be made up of Coca-Cola, Procter & Gamble, Enron, Google, Apple. If Enron went bankrupt, it wouldn't drastically impact that mutual fund. So that's why mutual funds are the best investments for most of us. I invest in mutual funds. There's a lot of different features to them, but the most important thing is that they help you diversify. So we'll go to the next one. Bond funds, again, just like a mutual fund, instead of being made of stocks, this is a collection of bonds. Bonds are basically an agreement, an arrangement you make with a government entity. You give them money, in exchange they're going to give you a principal or an interest payment every 6 months, every year, and at the end of that arrangement they're going to give you your money back. And that could be funded from the federal government, and you know your money will always be returned to you. It could be from a toll, and so every quarter they collect from the toll is paid back. It pays back the bondholders, or it could be a corporation. Money market funds. Think of this as cash. A lot of you have a money market investment in your 401k. One of the biggest mistakes I think I see people make is they put their money, all of their 401k assets, in the money market. What they don't realize is you're not going to really earn much interest on that money market because it's essentially cash. You might be earning 0.5% in today's day. The benefit to a money market is that you should earn more interest than you would in a checking or a savings account, and it's going to be safe. So if you have an expense, you want to buy a new car, or some expense coming up in the next year, you don't want to put it into the stock market because you can lose 30 or 40%. You might want to keep it safe in a money market.
And our 401k has a stable value.
Yes,
So
so
it's
other
very
names
similar.
for it are stable value funds.
Yeah.
So if you've got money in a stable value fund, it's probably not earning much, but it's going to be safer. So if you're worried about the next event and the market's going down, that's going to be one of your safer accounts. Hedge funds, these are more exotic investments. Everyday investors are not investing in hedge funds. Typically, you're going to see an institution like Harvard's endowment is invested in hedge funds, but these are very sophisticated strategies. They can give you high returns, but they charge high fees. You guys probably aren't going to invest in hedge funds. I don't invest in hedge funds. Very few people do. So I think we would move on from that. Certificates of deposit. Most of you are also probably familiar with CDs. You go to the bank. You've got, say, $2,000. You don't know what to do with it. You don't want to leave it sitting in the checking account earning 0.1%. So maybe you lock it up for 6 months or a year and you earn 1% or 1.5%. It's an agreement that's typically insured through the federal government. So it's a way of earning some extra money. The downside is you're locking it up for a fixed period of time. So I know a lot of these most of you are probably pretty familiar with it, but if you have any questions, definitely interrupt me and let me know. So what should you consider before investing? So we like to think of investing as a two-step decision process. The first thing is, what's your relationship with the IRS? So you guys have 401ks through Gray & Sons. The 401k is not the investment, it's the relationship with the IRS. Basically, you put money in, you get a tax deduction, so you're not taxed on the income or the amount you're contributing to it. It's going to grow tax-free, but when you pull money out of it, it'll be taxed in the future. Other investments that work similar to the 401k would be an IRA. You may have worked at another employer at some point and moved your 401k to an IRA. Well, it's got the same tax relationship with the IRS. A Roth IRA is a little bit different in that you're taxed on the money first, then you put the money into the investment account. The benefit is, as that grows in the future, you have a pot of money now that's never taxed again. It's tax-free. So you're going to pay taxes today in exchange for tax-free money in the future. There's non-qualified annuities, and then there's other names for other types of retirement plans. Does anyone's spouse in here work for the federal government? No? Okay. Well, that would be a TSP. Does anyone's spouse in here, is anyone a teacher or work for a nonprofit? There we go. We got one. So she probably has a 403B plan, just like the 401k, just different names, meant to confuse you essentially. The next step is, how much risk do you want to take? Within that 401k, you make a decision on how to invest it. And how much risk you want to take is determined by which investments you choose. So just like we were talking about before, if you want to be safe, you would invest in CDs. Another safer investment would be bonds. They're not going to lose 30% or 40% like stocks will. And then the most aggressive is stocks. The typical rule of thumb is, as you get older and you get closer to retirement, you've got a bigger pot of money that you're going to rely on in the future. The most important thing you can do is start protecting what you've saved your entire lives and start making your investments more conservative. At least until you have a plan and you know how much return and how much risk you need to take to live a long, happy life. So for those who are younger, if you're in your 30s like I am, I'm going to be more weighted towards stocks. For a lot of you in the room, you might have more of a 50-50 mix between stocks and bonds. And that's what our job is to do, is to help you decide what should be your mix between these various types of investments. Question?
One question back on the Roth. Now you said you won't be taxed on it, but the only part you're not be taxed on when you take it out would be the part you put in. You would still have to be taxed on the part you're not.
Nope.
On what you gain.
So his question, his thought was that when you put money into a Roth IRA, as that grows, is the whole thing tax-free in the future, or just what you put into it? And the answer is that the entire account is tax-free in the future. So that's the benefit, and that's why the government limits how much you can put into it. Otherwise, people would put a lot of money into these vehicles and have a lot of tax-free income in the future. But it's a nice tool that if you opened up a Roth IRA, maybe you contributed $1,000 a year. Say you put in $10,000 over the years, and now it's worth $20,000. That full $20,000 is going to be tax-free to you whenever you need it. So my belief is that it's nice to have different buckets of different types of accounts. If you have a Roth and you want to book a cruise, you can take tax-free money from the Roth. If you need just general retirement income, you might take from the 401k, but for every dollar you take out, you're going to send 20 cents to the government to pay taxes. So it's nice to have options. So, does anyone know the perfect investment? Anyone? I certainly do. The perfect investment would have these characteristics. It would avoid risk, so no risk. You'd get regular income. You'd get great returns. It would be tax advantaged. It would beat inflation. And it would be liquid, which means it's available to you anytime you need it. There's no penalties for pulling it out. It doesn't exist. So, unfortunately, the rest of us now we have to figure out with the different types of investments that are out there, if we want some of our money to avoid risk because maybe one of your children wants to put a down payment on a house in a year, they're not going to put that money they've saved at risk. You want to buy a new car next year, you're not going to put that money at risk. If you need regular income or high returns, you're going to put it in a riskier vehicle where it could go up and down, but in the long run, you should earn more than a safer investment. So if we go to the next slide here, Bob and I were just reminiscing of simpler times before kids had iPads and we all had cell phones, and it was simpler with investing too. You had stocks, bonds, and cash. It was pretty easy to decide where to put your money. In the 80s, we added some more categories. Instead of large companies, there were small companies. We had real estate limited partnerships because they had tax advantages. We started investing overseas in international markets. Then you saw the TV commercials for gold coins. Today, it's unbelievably complex. Bitcoins. I mean, no one's probably investing in Bitcoins, but that's available. Digital currency. We've got managed futures and hedge funds like we talked about before. Bonds are more complex. Instead of just government bonds, there's TIPS, Treasury and inflationary protected securities. There's municipal bonds, mortgage-backed securities. So a lot of types of investments today. Our job is to help you, and you have to decide what mix of these types of investments will get you to where you need to be to live a happy, successful life. One of the biggest mistakes we see people make is they put all their eggs in one basket. I mean, it's the most simplest rule we've learned our entire lives. So this chart, and it's probably hard to see, shows you different asset classes. So for example, the green is large company stocks, your Apple, your Google, your Amazon. And each year, it performs differently than, for example, orange, which is small companies. Or this color here, I can't even tell on the screen, which is commodities, which would be gold or oil. And what you notice is that there's not one investment that does the best year over year. Sometimes large cap stocks, like the last couple of years, are near the top. Sometimes they're the worst performing investment. So our belief is that you should own a little bit of everything and to be diversified. So some year you're going to have winners, some years you're going to have losers. But if you own everything, you're this middle line here. And you're always going to be in the middle. You're not going to get rich by investing in a lot of different types of investments, but you're not going to go poor. And I think as you get closer to retirement, that's the goal, is to make sure you don't lose everything you've worked your entire life for. Next page. Where I probably spend most of my time with clients is managing their emotions and their behaviors. It's less about which stocks or which mutual funds to pick. It's more about making sure you don't make bad decisions. Does everyone remember in 2006? You guys were all probably very busy at work. You were excited. People were talking about how well their 401ks were doing. You had euphoria. Everyone started putting more of their money into investments and doing riskier things. Then what happened? The market collapsed and we went down. The stock market went down and people had fear, panic, despondent, and then eventually it recovers. The problem what most people do is they add money up here when they're most excited, right before it goes down, and then they sell, they give up down here, right before it recovers. What you want to do in investing is buy low, right before it goes up, and sell high. It's the basic rules. But it's very hard to do. It's hard to control those emotions, which is why we stress having a plan and sticking to that plan, and don't make emotions or don't make decisions based on fear and greed. That's how you get into trouble. Next slide. So one of the things a lot of people will ask a financial advisor, and they'll say, well, what do you think? When should I invest? When's the best time? Well, obviously the best time is to buy something cheap and then sell something high, but we don't know when that is. I wish I had a crystal ball. The problem with trying to time the market and guessing when to get out and when to get in is typically the best part of the market is right after the absolute bottom, when most people are the most scared. They have the most fear. So if you were fully invested in the S&P 500, which is the 500 largest stocks, from January 1st, 1997 to the end of 2016, so for 20 years, if you just invested and you made it through all the ups and the downs, you would have averaged 7.6% per year. But if you missed just the 10 best days, you would have only earned 4%. If you if you missed just the best 20 days, you would have been at 1.57%, which means you probably would have been better off keeping your money in a checking account. So this little box here is telling us that 6 of the best 10 days occurred within 2 weeks of the 10 worst days. So whenever we see the markets go down, there's some news headline about North Korea, stocks go down, typically the next day they've shot back up. And so that's why we can't try to time the market and get out when we're worried and get back in when we're excited again. The key is to have a plan and stick to it. One of the things software and technology allows us to do today is to see how would your investments actually perform in a real-world crisis. So this is actually stuff we use, and it'll show you in blue here, this is the S&P 500. Green, so all stocks in blue, green is going to be roughly a 50% stock and bond portfolio. Well, in some years, by being more conservative, like during the tech bubble, the more conservative portfolio can actually make money when the stock market is down. The tech bubble, unfortunately, was when the S&P 500 was made up of tech stocks, and they did very poorly. But look at other crises. During the World Trade Center attack, stocks were down 11.5%. A balanced portfolio was down 5%. During the 2008 crisis, the stock market was down 41%. You were down half if you were in a mixed portfolio. So when you get closer to retirement, very few people are comfortable knowing they could lose 40% of their investments, of their retirement. It might be easier to swallow losing 5% temporarily. So you always want to test that and make sure you're invested in something you're comfortable with through the ups and the downs. Most common investment mistakes we see, people don't coordinate amongst multiple accounts. You've got your 401k, you might have an IRA, your wife might have another account, and she might have a fourth retirement account. You got to coordinate how you're invested across all those accounts. Not tax planning. We talked a lot about taxes, and if you have an investment account that's not a retirement plan, you can sell the losers at the end of the year and take a tax loss. being too aggressive and not knowing what your risk is, not knowing that maybe your investments could go down 40% when you're getting ready to retire. You should at least know what your risk is in your investments. Overlapping stocks. So you might own two different mutual funds, but within it they own the same stocks. So you're really investing in the same mutual fund even though you think they're different. And letting behaviors like fear and greed drive your decisions. The biggest mistake. Don't let fear and greed drive your decisions. So let's talk a little bit about retirement planning. The most important thing you can do is take advantage of what government allows you to invest in. Tax advantaged accounts. So number one thing is tax deferral can help your money grow. You're not going to touch it. It's going to grow. All the earnings are tax free. That's your 401k. Take advantage of it to the maximum ability that you can. Contribute to an IRA if you qualify outside of your 401k plan. And be wary of penalties for taking money out of your retirement accounts. I meet a lot of people who didn't realize it, but if you're younger than 59 and a half and you take money from your 401k or your IRA, not only do you pay taxes, but you pay a 10% penalty. The goal is to give the IRS as little money as possible and not pay them even more. So the next section is just the traditional 401k. So with your savings retirement 401k at work, when you contribute to that 401k, that money you put into it goes in before the government taxes you. So any money left over then gets taxed. So let's say you make $40,000 a year. If you put $5,000 in the 401k, you're only taxed on $35,000. That's a powerful thing because then that money can continue to grow. And when you retire and you take money out, you don't make $40,000 anymore. You're earning Social Security and taking from investments, so your tax bracket is much lower. It lowers your taxable income today. The employer will match, and we'll talk about that, I think, on the next slide. So if you're not contributing to this 401k, you're giving up free money. No one wants to give up free money. So we need to make sure you're taking advantage of that. You pay taxes when you take the money out. That's the only time on a 401k plan that you're going to pay taxes is when you pull money out of it. And like we just said, in the retirement, you'll be in a lower tax bracket, so you might not pay any taxes on that amount you pull out of it. So the Gray & Sons 401k plan, we work with a lot of companies. I see a lot of people's plans. This is one of the best plans out there because they give you free money. So you have the 401k. The next step for you is to figure out how to invest it. If you're younger, you're going to invest probably more in stocks and be more aggressive. If you're older, you want to add bonds and more conservative investments. And you have two options. Most of us get the statement in the mail. You look at the number, did it go up or down? And then you probably throw it in the trash. Most of us do that. So for you, the best option is probably what we call Do It For Me. It's a target date fund. It might say 2040 or 2020 on it, a certain year that you expect to retire. The beauty of those funds is that they get more conservative as you get closer to that date, and it's professionally managed. So if you're not going home after work every day and looking up different investments and on Yahoo Finance, then this is probably the best option for you. There's been studies done that say people who invest in these funds do better than those that try to pick and choose the investments themselves. I have 90% of my money in our plan's target date fund because I don't want to make bad decisions. The other option for those that are curious, they like to invest in other options, you have a menu of options to choose from and you can pick and choose your investments. One thing you could do if you're still curious but you want the professionals to do a lot of the work, you can put 90% of your money into a target date fund and just speculate or gamble a little bit, if you will, with something you think might do well. So I think international investments are going to do well the next couple of years. So I put 10% of my money in an international fund and the rest in a target date fund. Finally, make sure you're not giving up any free money. to get all the free money that Grandsons is going to give you, you have to contribute at least 6% of your salary. If you contribute at least 6% as the minimum, they're going to match you 3%. So 3% of your salary is free money. Unless you have, difficult financial circumstances, which everyone can have and many of us do, I would still try to strive for a minimum of 6%. If you can do more, try to go up 1% every year or 2% every year to contribute as much as you can. So, what's everyone's goals when we get to retirement? Well, you want to enjoy it. I think the one thing you have to understand before you enter retirement is really know what you're going to do. Some people, I just want to go fishing. I want to be able to sleep in. I want no one telling me what to do. I want to spend time with grandchildren. For others, I want to travel the world. I want to do a lot of things. I want to spend more money. Everyone's idea or vision of retirement is. But for those who don't enjoy retirement, it's people who really don't have a plan. So I think as much as we have a plan of what we're going to do every day at work, you should have a plan of what you're going to do when you retire as well. You have to manage the risk of outliving your income. It wasn't uncommon years ago for people to live just into their mid-60s or early 70s. Now I meet a lot of people whose parents are in their 90s, and a lot of us may live into our 90s or even over 100. So if you retire at 65, do you know if your investments will last for another 35 or 40 years? And so that's part of the planning process, is feeling confident that you can live that long and not outlive your savings. And then managing the risks of unexpected life events. That's kind of where we come in and say, have you thought about this? One of the biggest things I think a lot of you are dealing with, probably with parents right now, is assisted living or dementia and Alzheimer's. And do we have parents move in with us? Are they going to a facility? How do we help support them? And so planning for yourself so you're not a burden on your children is another important part of the planning process as well. Like everything else, there's always an equation. Here's the equation for retirement. Ultimately, though, in retirement, there's things we have complete control over, there's things we can't control, and there's things we have some control over. The number one thing to focus on is what we can control. We can control how much we save today while we're working, and we control how much is going out the door and how much we're spending. If you're spending more than's coming in, you've got troubles, and retirement's not going to be too successful. But if you get in a habit of saving more and spending less, you're going to have a very secure retirement with less risk of outliving your assets. The other thing you can control is where you put your money. We talked about asset